American beef stew. It's going to look a little something like this when we're done, and we're not going to use a crock pot, and we're not going to use one of those stupid Instapot things. We're going to make this in a Dutch oven. We're going to kind of go old school, and it'll be good. I promise. So the very first thing that we're going to do right here is light a chimney full of charcoal. Why am I doing this? I'm making a beef stew. I'm not grilling. I'm not doing barbecue. Why am I doing this? I'll tell you why. I don't have a vent hood in my kitchen that's worth a shit. A word on the beef. This is just a 3-pound chuck roast that I'm going to cut into steaks. Why? Well, most recipes will have you cube the beef up into, 3/4 or 1-inch pieces and then sear the crap out of them in a Dutch oven individually. I find that to be a pain in the ass. Why not just cut them into steaks, sear the shit out of them on both sides, let them rest, then cube them up? Way easier, same effect. And you reduce the possibility of basically just steaming the cubed meat, which is what a lot of people do. Oh, and I didn't show me cutting them up earlier, but those are, it's about 1.5 pound bag of baby red potatoes. I like really waxy potatoes instead of starchy ones in a stew. While the coals are outside getting coal-like, we'll turn our attention to the liquid that everything is going to be cooked in. We are using chicken stock, and I do mean chicken stock, not beef stock. Do not use a beef stock unless you made it yourself. All store-bought beef stock sucks and is unfit for human consumption. Use the chicken stock. You could just use a 32-ounce box of it or measure out 4 cups if you made it yourself. You're going to want to use a low-sodium chicken stock. This is going to reduce down quite a bit, and if you use a full-sodium chicken stock, it's going to be way too salty. It's much easier to just season it later to taste than it is to try and figure out a way to remove a bunch of salt, you dig? Food hack time. If you made your own chicken stock, you can skip this step. If you haven't, add an ounce of unflavored gelatin. If you made your chicken stock from scratch, you will have extracted all kinds of collagen from the bones, connective tissue, and so forth. Collagen is what gives your stew that luscious mouthfeel that coats your tongue and palate with all of that stewy goodness. It's also what helps to emulsify all the fat from the beef. We didn't make our own stock, so we're going to cheat by adding unflavored gelatin. I love this little hack so much. Umami time, my favorite. It's the 5th taste sensation. It's what makes a good stew savory. It's your taste receptors responding to glutamates. We're going to get those glutamates from 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, a couple tablespoons of soy sauce, a couple of tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, and a couple of anchovies, or alternatively, a tablespoon or 2 of fish sauce if you want. I forgot to film the anchovies going in, but you get the idea. Blend the ever-loving shit out of it, as depicted. Season it up with a little kosher salt and some fresh ground black pepper. Both sides, please. Oil up your Dutch oven with precisely 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Carefully measure. That looks like 2 tablespoons. Turning our attention back to the coals outside, they seem ready enough to me. We'll toss the Dutch oven on these to save the smoke detectors in the house and sear up our chuck roast that we cut into steaks earlier. These were searing okay in the Dutch oven on the coals. It certainly kept my smoke detectors from going off, but it wasn't developing quite the color that I wanted. I was getting a fair to midland fond going on in the pot, which is nice and needed, by the way, but I still wasn't getting the color that I wanted on the beef itself. I think I should have let the Dutch oven get a lot hotter over the coals before dropping the chuck in. So, chalk one up to late night drunk cooking. Still, I had an idea. Why not yank those bad boys out of the pot and cook them directly over the coals? I've already got a decent fond going in the pot, so let's get some char on them. A couple few minutes of that on each side and we're good. I went ahead and let them rest on a platter so that I could continue working on the rest of the dish. Can you tell it's late at night? It is very late at night. Quarter up a bunch of button mushrooms. I think I probably ended up using 10 ounces or so. Visually, I think it works well enough to just approximate the volume of potato you have. I think this ended up being about a package and a half or something. Seriously, it's not an exact science. The fond in the pot could have been a lot better, but I guess it'll do. I'll get the grill hotter next time, and so should you. At any rate, it's time to add the mushrooms. Medium-high heat. For the first few minutes of cooking, all you're really doing is releasing the liquid out of the mushrooms. After that's complete, they'll start taking on color. Once they develop a meaty-like consistency and a nice brown color, you're ready to move on. This can take 7 to 10 minutes. While the mushrooms are cooking down, and don't forget to stir them occasionally as we do this, we can turn our attention to the pearl onions. I love pearl onions in a stew because they're so sweet, and as a bite-sized piece of goodness on your fork, they don't give you that whoa onion thing when you bite into them. The thing is, they're a pain in the ass to peel, and I want to use a lot of them. It's for this reason that I always just buy a bag of peeled frozen ones. Hear me out. They're picked at the peak of freshness, peeled to save you time, and flash frozen to preserve their freshness. Win-win as far as this lazy cook is concerned, right? But alas, my local Walmart was out of them, so I bought a package of fresh ones. I'm having trouble peeling the damn things. This sucks. So, after doing a few of these the hard way, I turned to Google out of desperation, and I found a better way. And this is the better way. Bring a pot of water to boil and drop the pearl onions in there. Let them do that for 60 seconds, then put the pot under cold running water for another minute or two. Upon doing this, you'll notice that you can simply cut the ends of the onion off and squeeze them out of their skin. Perfect. As easy as peeled and frozen onions? No, but it's better than the alternative. It's been long enough, and the mushrooms have given up most of their moisture and have begun to take on a little color and develop a meaty texture. Add the pearl onion, and add a couple of chopped carrots. We're going to continue cooking these for a few minutes until they've softened up a bit and developed some more color. Easy enough. And then we're going to save them for later. This is important. One of the revelations I've had over the years of Googling this stuff and learning from people a hell of a lot smarter than me is that cooking all the vegetables the entire time just turns them to mush. They taste great and you get maximum flavor extraction, but the mouthfeel sucks. So why not add them back later in the process? All right, we're going to go ahead and have an onion. Ooh, you see where my thumb is right there, kids? Don't cook when you're half in the bag. Almost lost a tip. Related to what I said earlier regarding the texture and the mouthfeel of the vegetables, what about the other bit? What about all of that awesome flavor extraction that happens when you cook the shit out of the vegetables the entire time? It's as if you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Cook them the entire time and the stew tastes pretty good, but you're eating mush. pull the vegetables early and cook them near the end, and you don't have as much flavor as you'd like. Decisions. But, eureka! I have found it. Let's use some sacrificial veggies and herbs. The intent here is to stew the shit out of them until they've given up all of their flavor. Then, fish them out and discard them hoes like the proud Americans we are. Time to deglaze the pot with some flavor. For this, especially in a stew, nothing beats a dry red wine. I quite literally went to my local purveyor of happy juice, said I needed something extremely dry with a decent amount of alcohol, this clocked in at 13%, and a lot of tannins, for a mere pittance. He said, "Right then, good sir," which was odd for a Texan, and emerged with a bottle of Cabernet Franc, 2017 vintage, $10 a bottle to my wallet vintage. Nice. Deglaze. We're gonna keep this going over medium-high heat, constantly scraping the yummy bits off the bottom until the wine has reduced to something that resembles a glaze, or perhaps a thick sauce, if you will. You don't want it so thick that it becomes sticky or gummy, just something that looks like it could coat those hoes for vegetables we have going. Remember that umami bomb sauce we made earlier in the blender? The stuff with the chicken stock, the gelatin, the tomato paste, the soy sauce, the sauce, and the anchovies? Pour that in and let it come to a boil. And while you're doing that, break up and add a couple of stalks of celery. Again, with the late night half in the bag cooking. This is probably something you would want to add earlier, say perhaps when you're busy putting some color on the onion, garlic, and carrot. Remember that? This could use some of that too, but, it'll be fine. Just add it. We're gonna do like everything else and extract all of its vegetable goodness before discarding it. Oh, as an aside, remember those vegetables we cooked up earlier? It's fine to finally clean the cutting board off and toss the potatoes we cut up in the bowl. I'm really not sure why I didn't do this earlier. In fact, I'm not even sure why I did so much prep on the cutting board with these things on it. I blame bourbon. Remember all of that chuck we had from earlier that's been resting this entire time? Go ahead and cube it up. The size is certainly a personal preference thing. This will be soft enough to cut with the edge of a spoon if you cut them kind of large. Myself, I can't be bothered. So I'm going to go with about a 3/4 inch cut-ish. It's really up to you. There's an argument to be made that the beef is actually better when cubed and stewed in larger pieces, only to be cut up later into bite-sized morsels with your spoon while eating, but I don't know, make up your own mind. Danger! There be dragons! A lot of cooks find themselves disappointed with the thickness of the sauce in their stew and compensate for it by adding a lot of flour. Do not fall into this trap. Yes, it will thicken it, but there's a fine line between creamy and velvety and this bullshit tastes and feels like library paste. We already took care of the mouthfeel earlier when we added gelatin to our store-bought stock. Nice of us, right? So, if you add a lot of flour or even cornstarch, you will indeed thicken it. But every tablespoon of those thickeners you add will dilute the flavor you've worked so hard to create. We've covered the thickness earlier, and not without a great deal of thought, so resist the temptation. A couple of tablespoons sprinkled over the beef will do just fine. You don't even need to make a roux when you do it this way. Oh, all of those juices that were left behind from the meat resting earlier? Let's go ahead and add those in. We're not going to let that go to waste. go ahead and let it bring up, come up to a boil, and add some bay leaves and a little bit of thyme. I want to say that's like 4 sprigs or whatever, but I don't know. You get the idea. It's not an exact science. Just add it. Let it soak in there and do its thing for a little while. All right, so now that we've brought it back up to a boil, what we're doing here is putting a temperature probe in. And what I want to see is between 180 and like 190 degrees. And you'll notice I have the lid on it. It's cracked a little bit. The oven is set at 275, maybe 300. Everybody's oven is a little bit different, but ideally what we want to see is that bubbling mixture to be about 180 to 190, something like that. So let's go ahead and do that. Close enough. At this point, it's been in the oven for about an hour and a half, so I'm going to fish out what I call the sacrificial vegetables. So that's the huge pieces of onion, celery, carrot, and garlic, along with the bay leaves and thyme I threw in there. They've given up all of their flavors, and we don't need them anymore. Season it a bit and then stir it just a wee bit. Yeah, we're good. Let's go ahead and scoop a little bit of that into the bowl, shall we? And then what I'd like to do here is break off a little thyme with my fingers and just sprinkle it on. A little thyme goes a long way. Enjoy.